All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Tucker Beckett. I'm a senior planner at the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. I'm joined here by my colleague, Charles Vidic, senior project manager at WestCog. And we're here tonight to go over the insights from the latest WestCog report, which focuses on the economic role of land, how it's become detached from traditional zoning categories, and particularly in regard to productive industry. This presentation is intended to meet the continuing education requirements for you as a land use commissioner. As we all know, regulation of land use through zoning is one of the most impactful responsibilities of local government. Though much has changed in the last century, the increasing complexity of zoning, for the most part, continues to rest on the same basic methods of categorization, dominated by three major categories: residential, commercial, and industrial. In this report, we argue that industry and commerce have fundamentally changed over time, with industry becoming cleaner, quieter, and smaller, while retail and service has become increasingly reliant on intensive logistics and vehicle traffic. This convergence of impact has opened the door to misclassification of land use, which obscures the real economic role of land and impacts planning across all levels. The purpose of this report is to call attention to the need for intentional planning for industrial and service industrial land uses. Over the course of this brief presentation, we're going to cover the change in industrial and commercial activity over time and how misclassification occurs and why it matters. We'll discuss the value of industrial land, service industrial zoning as a practical response to this misclassification, and the implications of all of this in the statutory environment in Connecticut, particularly as it relates to recent legislation. So zoning arrived to a Connecticut dominated by industry on a massive scale. Centralized production required large amounts of infrastructure and mass employment, and it came with significant impacts on the environment and public health. All of this has changed dramatically over the last 75 years. As global trade has allowed the most impactful industries to congregate in cheaper labor markets, what industry has remained has a much smaller footprint and is less incompatible with other uses. This has been enabled largely through specialization of manufacturing. Instead of a centralized model, now individual components are manufactured across the world and shipped to a single point for final assembly. This has necessitated a shift in focus towards logistics management, meaning factories dedicate greater staff time to administration than production, and creating an increasing reliance on warehousing. At the same time, commercial land uses have expanded in scale, becoming increasingly reliant on just-in-time delivery, e-commerce, and vertical integration of production. This has led to increased impacts on vehicle traffic and stormwater runoff from large impervious surfaces. On a smaller scale, local manufacturers in things like brewing, woodworking, metal fabrication, and so on often sell goods directly to the public on site. In this way, the categorical distinctions become blurred, and zoning officials are left to sort through different types of businesses and different uses on a case-by-case basis. This has been addressed piecemeal with solutions like flexible business zones, mixed use zoning, planned development districts, or even just special permits and variances. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie at this point to talk about how this kind of misclassification occurs in practice.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tucker. Well, the assumptions about dirty industry is one of several reasons that create the potential for misclassification of land use. But how does it occur? The previous era of smokestack industries has left negative connotations and assumption of incompatibility. Commercial zones are seen as cleaner and quieter despite coming with significant impacts of their own. As a result, industry and service uses are folded into commercial zones as a catch-all, maintaining productive economic activity while avoiding the political sensitivity or community concerns with industrial zoning. This is adaptation through reclassification rather than reevaluation. And this is where the trouble starts. We'll go to the next slide. So the problem is compounded by different zoning structures. In towns that use cumulative zoning, where commercial uses are able to easily locate in industrial zones, contributing to misclassification and the erosion of valuable industrial land. Non-cumulative zoning models, where districts are exclusive to one category, can provide greater clarity, but only if the underlying classifications are accurate. In both cases, the problem is not cumulative versus non-cumulative zoning. It is the lack of a clear conceptual framework to communicate the economic role of land. So we'll go on to the next slide here. The next slide will be, okay, here we go. Westcott reviewed the state's industrial zoning districts to determine trends in whether retail or residential uses are also allowed in industrial zones. What we found is that neither pure cumulative nor pure non-cumulative approaches exist in Connecticut. As you'll see from this table, those blue boxes are what we'll discuss for a moment. 59 industrial zones out of 290 that exist allow for cumulative zoning, and 46 industrial zones have adopted a non-cumulative approach, as you can see in these tables. The most popular approach is to prohibit residential development, but allow commercial development in the state's industrial zones. The implication is that most zoning commissions do not want residential uses in the industrial zones. So this is a snapshot as of really just the last couple weeks of what is going on in Connecticut. And we'll get into this in more detail why that's significant. We'll go to the next slide here. So what has this misclassification led to? Why does it matter? Well, productive industrial and service industrial activity has largely become hidden on zoning maps, with commercial zones becoming catch-all areas for uses that didn't fit neatly anywhere else. Industrial zones are sometimes reserved for a few large-scale industries that don't resemble anything else. This all has several consequences for planning. Transportation planning is distorted as trip generation assumptions become misaligned with reality. Productive industrial / service industrial land is open to incremental erosion as commercial districts are viewed as more appropriate conversion to other uses. And of course, this is seen most recently in recent housing legislation 25-1 that we'll talk about later. It's important to note that none of this is intentional. This is a result of zoning systems that haven't caught up with the changing economic reality. The response shouldn't be a return to older models of industrial zoning or privileging production over community needs like housing. Intentional alignment is needed. So we'll go on to the next slide here. To better understand the misclassification, for context on relative traffic impacts, we can compare trip generation rates for some typical uses in different categories. There is a wide range across each category. Industrial uses tend to generate much fewer trips. We'll return to these figures in a bit, and you can see the differences between convenience stores' trip generation rates of 762 trips per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area versus manufacturing of 4.8. So these are significant issues that are not captured by virtually all the zoning regulations in Connecticut, with the exception of a few, such as Middletown and the town of Brookfield, where they do actually look at these issues. So now I'll turn it back over to my colleague Tucker.
Thank you. So part of this alignment is recognizing the specific economic role of industrial land within a region. In many areas, industrially zoned land provides the backbone of production, maintenance, repair, and skilled trade services that support all other commercial and residential activity. It's also a solid employment base, maintaining a core body of well-paying, often unionized jobs. These uses are more closely linked to physical space than more interchangeable commercial uses. They can require things like access to transportation networks, power and water infrastructure, proximity to suppliers, or specific labor pools. They also often require large, contiguous parcels. Because of all this, they're very difficult to recover if the land is converted to other uses. And misclassification obscures where this might be occurring, which makes it really hard to track. One way to approach this is through dedicated service industrial zoning. Service industrial encompasses a wide range of uses that fall between traditional industrial and commercial categories, but they share some key similarities. Generally, they're vertically integrated, meaning that multiple stages of production or sale occur on site. Where retail activity is involved, it's usually limited in scope and secondary to production, although this isn't always the case. They also have smaller footprints, both in terms of physical space and in environmental impact. Some examples of service industrial uses are precision manufacturing of things like medical tools, scientific instruments, furniture, cabinetry, and woodworking, apparel and fashion industries, electronics assembly, artisan food production, things like your coffee roasters, local wholesale bakeries, um, copy print sign shops, textile printers, and also art studios or even tattoo studios. Well, Middletown, Connecticut is the first and only municipality to adopt the concept of a service industrial zone yet. It represents the merger of commercial and manufacturing sectors with a focus on businesses that provide services to the public and also generate employment. The concept of the service industrial zone is important insofar as it represents a modern approach to merging commercial and industrial uses in one zone with a focus on public access to services that are not normally ones that are not normally associated with industrial land uses. Dedicated service industrial zoning serves to separate out low impact industrial and service activities into a distinct category, recognizing their distinct needs and compatibilities. The key benefit of this approach is that it maintains clarity of intent in zoning and protects critical employment land, preserving true industrial zoning for uses with greater land use needs, like we talked about earlier. Outside of strictly service industrial uses, other low impact uses on the fringes of the other categories can be included in a service industrial zone. This includes things like offices, skilled trade contractors, specialty services, and light industries. The pictures to the right of this slide show some examples of buildings that you might include in a service industrial zone. The top left there is New England Brewing Co., which I believe is in Hamden, I want to say. Um, right just below that is a textile printing shop right here in Danbury. To the right of that, you might recognize this picture from the banner image at the top of this slide. This is it's a small heat treating company in Waterbury. As you can see, it's got a very small footprint, and it's nestled right in there between a local bank and a pharmacy. And it fits in very well there. On the bottom from left to right, you have a stained glass studio in um, in Plantsville in Southington. They manufacture all the stained glass on site and also sell all their products there as well. There's all, and then on the right, the bottom right is a cabinet company in Plainville. I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie as we jump back to over to our trip generation rates.
Okay. Um, the chip generation rates for commercial, as you can see, we talked about the convenience stores having 762 trips for a typical convenience store. And in the middle column, industrial, you can see an industrial park has 3.4 trips generated per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, and manufacturing 4.8. So you can see a dramatic difference in what commercial trip generations are versus the industrial uses that we have today, not of 40 years ago, but what we have today. And then, of course, you have the service industrial use, which is a bit of a combination of the two, but more closely aligned with the industrial in terms of the chip generation rates that you will find. So this is a very important point because in Connecticut, there's only a handful of municipalities that have actually referenced the trip generation rates put out by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And yet it represents the best available science that we have for determining the impacts of traffic for these various land uses. So I guess you could go on to the next slide. Okay. Let's see. On the issue of service-based industries in the United States, what we have here are some examples. In over the last 50 years, there's been a vertical integration of many industrial, commercial, and service industries in the United States. Vertically integrated businesses are companies, as we've said, that own or control multiple stages of their supply chain, from production to distribution and retail, rather than relying on external suppliers. This strategy aims to increase efficiency, reduce costs, secure supply chains, and gain tighter control over quality, in some cases, the market. This phenomenon has been accelerated by the increased use of computers, robotics, and the development of small-scale, lower-cost technologies to create products and services. And here we're showing the apparel and fashion industry, artisan foods, and beverages and specialized design and manufacturing. And I think for those of you who go out to coffee shops, you'll find there are many coffee shops now that not just sell coffee, but actually brew their own coffee from making the actual ordering of the materials and actually making their coffees right on site, as opposed to just buying packaged material and doing what you would do normally at home. So there's an enormous amount of this going on in terms of not only the coffee roaster strategy, but microbreweries in particular. You're finding that as well. But this is a whole new innovation, which actually has economic and has market value for many businesses that are doing it. People are fascinated to be able to see the whole production process, and they walk in to get a retail donut and they see the bread being manufactured. So these things have value in multiple ways, not only marketing, but in terms of the efficiency of the business. You can go to the next slide. This is the second half of the issue here. And here are two more examples of service industry categories for technology and specialized assembly and creative publishing. Today, anyone can be an author using their own home computer. Furthermore, if they have the skills and software, they can also perform digital printing, marketing, and distribution on a small scale. And there are places, and I know this is true up in Cambridge, Harvard Square, there's a Harvard bookstore that not now, but was formerly doing on-demand printing of books. So you could not only you could buy books that were printed by publishers out of New York or any other place in the world. Or you could just say, I want this book printed. And it's maybe a book that's the copyright has expired and anyone can print it and they could on demand do so. So this is another example of vertical integration. Uh, one of the challenges posed by creating a service industrial zone is that it may require reassessment of what is called the principal use of the land. Most zoning regulations regulate the principal land use and limit other activities by labeling them subordinate uses. What happens in a vertically integrated business defies those definitions and calls for more flexibility consistent with the specific intent of the service industrial users. There may not be one principal use in a vertically integrated business over the life of that business. Now, there may be a principal use when it begins, but it may change over time. So these are the interesting things about that type of issue, and how a zoning commission handles that would be whether or not they would require a new permit when the tipping point occurs from going from an accessory to a principal use, or whether that is a new way of thinking about service industrial uses. So we can go to the next slide. So context here is the statutory environment we're living in right now in Connecticut. We've been stressing so far the issue of planning intent. The stakes for misclassification rise when we look at the statutory environment in Connecticut, where zoning labels and their misapplications carry substantive impact. The most significant pieces of land use planning legislation in recent memory with respect to housing is the Section 8-30G and Special Session Public Act 25-1. Both explicitly exempt industrially zoned land from their provisions, but facilitate the conversion of commercially zoned land. This reflects the assumption that commercial land is suitable for conversion. In parentheses here, Public Act 25-1 exempts industrial now, but we're waiting at the cliff's edge in the next few days to determine whether that will remain so. So we will see what happens. Stay tuned if you see this presentation after May 6th. But when commercial zones are frequently used as catch-all areas and the land use needs of service industrial uses aren't distinctly considered, this can lead to the erosion of ideal service land and gets in the way of effective prioritization of land for housing. This is something that has to be given thought, because the issue of the purpose of zoning is to provide for a variety of types of housing and other uses. The zoning was not designed just for housing. Zoning has many purposes. So this is one of the challenges and one of the reasons this presentation is being given today, so that we understand the balancing act between these various land uses. We can go to the next slide here. So as part of our research, we did look at all the zoning regulations in Connecticut for every industrial, business, industrial, and commercial zone in Connecticut. So most commercial industrial zones in Connecticut do not allow residential development. You'll see that on line 1. 201 of the 280 zones that don't allow it, from the point of view of what we have in Connecticut, the 313 zones, 280 do not allow multi or single family development. And there's a reason for that historically, as Tucker has talked about. 76% of the state's commercial zones do not allow residential development, and 93% of the state's industrial zones do not allow residential development. So residential development can be compatible with commercial development when planned properly. This is an important issue that is directly related to the mandates of Public Act 25-1, as we discussed. We can go on to the next slide. So the conclusion is really dealing with zoning with intent. Ultimately, intentional zoning for industry does not mean diminishing the importance of residential or commercial uses. It means ensuring that zoning maps clearly communicate planning intent and that the land use needs of both commercial, service industrial uses can be effectively considered. This allows for more effective planning across the board. This benefits residents, property and business owners, and developers as well. It allows state statutes to function as intended. Service industrial zoning offers a practical path forward towards this goal. This presentation was meant to serve as a brief overview of the ideas covered in the report that we've at WestCog issued very recently. The full text is available on our website. It's a short but dense 24-page read. We hope it is informative, but we're happy to address any questions right now as well. And now I'll turn it over to Tucker for the discussion session.
And thank you if you've made it to this point. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Charlie. We're always happy to talk about it. And you can find us at Westcog. Thank you all. Have a good evening.